The tragedy of Magic Johnson is that the world only allowed him to win. We remember the brightest smile in basketball, the no-look passes that shredded every defense, and the 6'9" giant who single-handedly rescued an entire dying league from the brink of bankruptcy, turning basketball into a religion of joy and forcing every opponent of the 1980s to drop to their knees and call him Showtime. We remember 5 championship rings, 3 MVP awards, the absolute dominator who crushed everything in his path. What we never see is the wound behind all that glory, at the most radiant peak of age 32, when he discovered he was HIV-positive. He played basketball with an almost childlike joy, because the court was the only place where life felt lighter than the sentence slowly eating him from the inside. But outside the baseline, that joy was not so easy to find. The icon who once made even his rivals bow in admiration was also the man who had to drag himself home, drop to his knees before his pregnant wife, and utter the cruelest words. "I may have brought death into this house, and if you want to leave, I beg you not to look back." The legend once worshipped by all of America was also the man stabbed in the back by his closest friend, when Isaiah Thomas chose not to stand beside him, but to whisper behind his back in NBA locker rooms. Basketball has never told the full story. Behind the most blazing glory in sports history, the world was far more ruthless than any finals he ever stepped into. And today, behind the 67-year-old face of the greatest legend basketball has ever produced, lies the question of how a man wakes up at 4 a.m., takes his medicine, counts his T-cells, and quietly fights the disease of the century for 35 years, without a single day of rest, without a final buzzer, without a single arena watching. Before we dig deeper to find the real man who survived behind it all, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like for Magic Johnson. Irvin Johnson Jr. was born on August 14, 1959, the 4th child of Irvin Sr. and Christine Johnson. His childhood held no sudden losses or deaths. His tragedy was subtler and more profound. It was the tragedy of a father present in the house but absent from his son's life. Irvin Sr. worked the assembly line at the General Motors plant from early morning until late afternoon. Then, when the city sank into darkness, he climbed into a garbage truck and drove all over Lansing to earn every extra dollar to feed 7 mouths. He loved his children. He loved basketball. He loved his family so much that he destroyed his own body every day to keep that roof from collapsing. But love cannot replace presence, and young Irvin grew up in the shadow of a father he admired, yet rarely got to sit beside long enough to talk. The one who kept that house from falling apart was Christine, the mother, whom Magic would later call the steel pillar of everything he became. She set the rhythm for the entire family when the father was too exhausted to do it. 7 children, a small house, a neighborhood where the future was promised to no one. And Christine held it all together with faith, discipline, and love. In that world, basketball appeared not as a refuge from pain, but as the only escape from the poverty tightening its grip. Irvin played to win, to escape, to prove that a kid from Lansing had the right to demand a different life, that the assembly line and the garbage truck were not the only destinies written for the Johnson family. As a teenager, Irvin took a job mopping floors in a 7-story building. He mopped the first 6 floors seriously, diligently, exactly as his father had taught him about honest labor. But when he reached the 7th floor, the floor with the executive offices, the boy stopped. He set the mop down, walked into the office, sat in the leather chair of the boss, put his feet up on the desk, and pretended he was the CEO. No one saw that moment. But 30 years later, when Irvin Johnson Jr. sat atop an empire worth $1.5 billion, the boy on the 7th floor would smile because he had always known that chair belonged to him. That ambition, the fire burning deep in the veins of that poor kid, would save him when HIV arrived. The name Magic came when a local reporter named Fred Stabley Jr. gave it to him after watching a high school game in which the Everett High School student scored 36 points, 18 rebounds, and 16 assists, numbers many professional players never reach in a single game in their entire careers. From that night, Irvin Johnson Jr. disappeared. Magic stepped forward. When the world called him Magic, almost no one remembered that inside that armor was still Irvin, the kid who watched his father work 2 shifts every day and swore he would never live like that. In 1977, Magic and Everett High School won the Michigan State Championship, and the entire city of Lansing stood up to salute its son one last time before he left. Magic Johnson grew from tragedy, from willpower, from the sweat of his father on the assembly line, from the steel hands of his mother holding 7 children from falling into the abyss, from the executive chair on the 7th floor that the mopping boy dared to sit in when no one was looking. That will would become his strongest weapon, the only thing standing between him and death when the HIV sentence was handed down. But that same will would also grow inside him the most dangerous belief, that he could conquer everything, including temptation, including the limits of the possible. In 1977, at Michigan State University, the 18-year-old freshman met 2 people who would shape his entire destiny, one he would love for life and one he would need for life. The first was Erlitha Cookie Kelly. After only 3 months of dating, Magic told her and his parents straight out, "This is the woman I will marry." That promise sounded like the thunder of an 18-year-old madly in love, but it would take 14 years to fulfill, would be betrayed countless times, would be canceled by Magic himself twice right before the wedding day. Because only 3 months after that ironclad vow, Cookie came to Magic's dorm room and found another girl wearing his bathrobe. The student who promised to love her forever was also the student who could not refuse any temptation that knocked on his door. That was the first crack. The second was Larry Bird, not a friend, not a love, but the enemy fate forced him to carry for life. The 1979 NCAA final between Michigan State and Bird's Indiana State became the highest-rated college basketball game in American television history. Magic scored 24 points and 7 assists as Michigan State crushed the opponent 75-64. But more important than any number, Magic and Bird and Magic, from that moment until the end of their lives, each would be the only measuring stick the other used to judge himself. The 1979 NBA draft came right after, and the Los Angeles Lakers selected Magic with the first pick. From Lansing, a gray, freezing working-class city, to Los Angeles. Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard, neon lights, money, fame, beautiful women lining up. The contrast between the 2 cities was not just geographic. It was a sign of everything about to crash down on his life. Glory and fall, light and darkness, all packaged in the same zip code. In the 1980 NBA Finals, Game 6, the Lakers faced the Philadelphia 76ers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the legendary center, the soul of the team, suffered a serious injury and could not play. Coach Paul Westhead made the most insane decision in basketball history. Put Magic, the 20-year-old 6'9" rookie, at center, the position designed for giants 20 pounds heavier than him. What happened next was history. Magic scored 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, playing every position on the floor as if the concept of position did not apply to him. The Lakers won the championship. The 20-year-old rookie won Finals MVP. No one in NBA history had ever done this before, and nearly half a century later, still no one has repeated it. With the Lakers, Magic met Kareem. Kareem was quiet, intellectual, reading philosophy on flights, while teammates played cards, keeping distance from the media as if fame were something to be guarded against. Magic was the opposite, radiant, open, wanting to hug everyone, smile at everyone, be loved by everyone. The difference created friction, then gradually turned into deep respect. But it also exposed a truth about Magic that would later become both his armor and his Achilles heel. Magic Johnson needed to be loved, needed admiration like oxygen. When that need was directed onto the court, it became extraordinary leadership magnetism, the ability to pull teammates, pull fans, pull an entire city into his orbit. But when directed outside the court, that need became a hunger to be satisfied, to be affirmed, to be enjoyed, and Los Angeles was ready to supply it all, regardless of the hour, regardless of the consequences. At age 20, Irvin Johnson Jr. had completely disappeared inside Magic Johnson. The boy who mopped the 7-story building now sat atop the sports world, wearing a championship ring. But Los Angeles did not only give him glory, it gave him unlimited temptation, freedom without barriers, and the dangerous belief that a man named Magic could touch anything. Magic Johnson did not just dominate basketball, he saved it. Before Magic, the NBA was dying. Television ratings were so low that the NBA Finals had to be broadcast at midnight as delayed tape because no network believed enough people would watch live. Many teams were deep in the red. Arenas had thousands of empty seats. Professional American basketball was slowly sinking into nothingness. Then Magic arrived, and he did not throw a life raft. He turned the entire sinking ship into a yacht. What he and the Los Angeles Lakers created in the 1980s was not a basketball team. It was a cultural phenomenon called Showtime. Showtime was not just the lightning-fast breaks or the no-look passes Magic threw as if he had eyes in the back of his head. Showtime was a philosophy of living. The Lakers of Magic's era played basketball like a top jazz band improvising. Every pass a surprising note, every fast break a wild solo. And the conductor of that orchestra was the 6'9" point guard with a smile wider than the court. The front row seats at the Forum were no longer for ordinary fans. Jack Nicholson sat there, Dustin Hoffman sat there. Hollywood flocked because Magic had turned basketball into A-list entertainment, the only thing in Los Angeles that rivaled cinema. 5 championships, 1980, 1982, 1985, 1987, 1988. 5 rings in 9 years. An entire generation of American kids grew up knowing only one thing. The Lakers win, Magic smiles, and the world revolves around that axis. 3 regular season MVPs, 3 finals MVPs, 12 All-Star selections. Averages of 19.5 points and 11.2 assists over 13 seasons. But the numbers do not tell the full story. What made Magic irreplaceable was not that he was great, but that he was great in a way no one could explain. A man 6'9", the height of a power forward, of the muscular guys battling under the basket, passed with the vision of a genius point guard, handled the ball more smoothly than the smallest guards, and stepped in to play center and score 42 points when needed. That combination had never existed before him, and nearly half a century later still no one has repeated it. But to truly understand the stature of Magic Johnson, you have to look at him alongside Larry Bird, because without Bird there is no Magic as we know him. And without Magic, Bird is only a great player instead of an immortal legend. The chain that bound the two from the night of the 1979 NCAA final was never unfastened. The opposition was so perfect it was as if the universe designed them for each other. Bird White, from the poor town of French Lick, blue collar to the bone, playing with cold ruthlessness, representing the America of the working class, of gray Boston winters, of gritted teeth endurance. Magic Black, Hollywood, radiant LA, playing with pure joy, representing the America of dreams, of sunshine, of generosity. The Celtics and Lakers put on the personalities of each team's star, and every time the two teams collided, it was no longer basketball. It was a war between two halves of America's soul. That rivalry did not just save the NBA, it turned the NBA into an empire. Bird woke up every morning, and the first thing he did, even before coffee, was open the newspaper to check Magic's box score from the night before. Magic did the exact same thing. They hated each other on the court, with an intensity few rivalries could match, yet needed each other to the very end, because without that enemy, each would have been merely a guy who played basketball well, instead of two gods dividing the throne. Later, when HIV arrived, Bird would be one of the first to call. And that loyalty would contrast ruthlessly with the betrayal of another friend Magic had once trusted even more than Bird. The moment Showtime froze into eternity came in Game 4 of the 1987 NBA Finals, Lakers versus Celtics. 2 seconds left, Lakers up by 1. Celtics with the ball. The whole world thinking Bird would find a way to kill the Lakers the way he had hundreds of times before. But Magic stole the ball, raced the length of the floor, and in the final instant, instead of choosing safety, launched a right-handed hook shot, the legendary Junior Skyhook, arsing over 3 Celtic defenders and dropping cleanly through the net as the final buzzer sounded. Magic turned toward the stands, both fists raised to the sky, and the smile that night, the smile of a man who had just killed his greatest enemy with the most impossible shot, was the smile basketball would remember until the sport itself ceased to exist. Behind that glory stood another man who played a pivotal role, Jerry Buss, the Lakers owner whom Magic called his second father. Buss did not see in Magic merely a player. He saw a commercial icon, a living brand, and a future partner. The two shared the wild vision that basketball could become show business, and that vision itself gave birth to Showtime. Magic learned business from Buss over long dinners and private flights, gradually absorbing the mindset of the wealthy long before he knew those lessons would one day save his life when basketball was stripped from his hands. By 1991, Magic Johnson, at age 32, was a living legend in the literal sense. 5 championship rings, 3 MVPs, the face of the NBA, the cultural icon of an entire generation. He had just married Cookie after 14 years. She was carrying their first child. And for the first time, every piece had fallen into place. The court, love, family, fame, all lining up in perfect order, as if the universe had finally paid its debt to the kid from Lansing. His life was so perfect it almost did not feel real. And precisely because it was not real, it did not last. Only 45 days after the wedding, the world Magic had built for 32 years would collapse in a single afternoon, with one sentence from a doctor, and no skyhook on earth could save him from what was coming. What America thought of HIV in 1991. By that point, AIDS had already killed more than 100,000 Americans. There was no effective treatment. An HIV diagnosis was not bad news. It was a death sentence. Society regarded it as a gay disease. Those who contracted it did not merely die. They died in the disgust, rejection, and isolation of their own communities. No one touched the sick. No one hugged the sick. Having HIV in 1991 meant you not only lost your life, you also lost the right to be treated as a human being. And that was the world Magic Johnson stepped into when he received his test results. Everything began with a routine preseason physical before the 1991-92 season. Standard, ordinary, the kind every NBA player underwent each year without a second thought. But this time the results were not ordinary. Magic was in Utah preparing for a preseason game when he received the call. He had to return to Los Angeles immediately. Lakers team physician Michael Melman wanted to see him in person, not over the phone, face to face. When Magic sat down across from Melman, he already knew something was wrong, but he did not know how wrong. Melman said it straight. "You are HIV positive." Magic asked, "Are you sure?" Melman nodded. Magic asked again, and again, and again. Hundreds of times the same question, as if asking enough times might change the answer. It did not change. We ran the tests multiple times. The results are all the same. Magic collapsed right there in the examining room. The man who had scored 42 points at center in an NBA Finals game. The man who had launched the skyhook that killed the Celtics in front of Larry Bird. The man all of America called Magic because they believed he could do anything. That man sat in a hospital chair and wept like an 8-year-old child just told by the world that he was about to die. But the examining room was not the most painful place. That place was the drive home. Magic later said, "The drive home was the longest of my life." Cookie was waiting at the house, his wife, married 45 days, pregnant with their first child. The woman who had waited 14 years for him had the engagement broken twice, forgiven him more times than she could count, and finally, had the life she dreamed of. Magic walked into the house and destroyed it all with one sentence. Cookie slapped him across the face. Then both of them dropped to the floor and cried. Cookie later recalled, "I didn't have time to be angry about what had happened or to start asking questions. The only thought in my head was, he might die, and that overwhelmed everything." Magic looked at her and spoke the cruelest words a husband can say to his wife. "If you want to leave, I won't blame you. It's okay." Cookie did not leave. Her decision to stay in that moment was not a side detail in the story. It is the reason Magic Johnson is still alive today. But the horror did not stop there. Cookie was pregnant. Had the baby been infected? Had Cookie herself contracted the virus? The answer would take weeks. Weeks living in a hell of not knowing whether he had already killed his wife and child. And while waiting, Magic did something no camera ever recorded yet more haunting than any press conference. He sat alone in a room and called every woman he had ever slept with, one by one, to tell them he was HIV positive and that they might have been exposed. Cookie sat outside that door, listening to her husband call women whose names she did not know, whose faces she had never seen, whose number she could not count. That image, the most powerful man in American sports, sitting alone, calling the ghosts of his promiscuous past while his pregnant wife sat silently outside, is the most brutal image in this entire story. It has no soundtrack, no stage lights, only raw humiliation and absolute silence. November 7, 1991. The press conference. Hundreds of cameras. The whole world watching. Just before walking out, Magic turned to Dr. Melman and asked one final question. "I want to be clear. I have HIV, not AIDS, right?" Melman nodded. Magic stepped out. Cookie stood beside him in a white suit. She later said it was a symbol of breaking and the future, because she refused to wear black to her husband's press conference as if attending a funeral. At first, Cookie did not want a press conference. At that time, people weren't educated about the disease. They thought you couldn't touch someone who had it, couldn't hug someone who had it. I didn't want people treating us like lepers. But Magic insisted on speaking. He stood before hundreds of reporters and announced his retirement. America froze. Magic Johnson, black, heterosexual, the masculine icon of an entire generation, had contracted the disease society assigned to gay men. That truth shattered every prejudice, yet also created new ones. Many refused to believe he was straight. Hate mail poured in. NBA players feared sharing the court with him. Karl Malone publicly said he was worried about his own safety. But Magic stood before them all and spoke a sentence history would remember. I will beat it, and I will have fun. Courage? Absolutely. But also the defense mechanism of a man who knew no other way except to smile. Magic chose to fight with a smile, the only weapon he had. But was a smile enough to defeat what was flowing through his own veins? On November 7, 1991, the world lost Magic Johnson, the basketball player. Yet on that same day, another Magic Johnson began to be born, the man who would turn a death sentence into a life longer, richer, and more meaningful than everything 5 championship rings and 3 MVP awards combined had ever given him. Only the price of living that life, the price paid every morning at 4 a.m., every pill, every T-cell count, no camera ever filmed, no arena ever witnessed, and no applause ever rose for. Only 3 months after the press conference that shook the world, Magic Johnson returned to a basketball court, the 1992 NBA All-Star Game in Orlando. Commissioner David Stern made a decision half of America considered brave and the other half considered insane, allowing a man who was HIV-positive to compete alongside the healthiest athletes on the planet. Many players were afraid, not afraid of Magic, afraid of what lived in his blood, afraid of contact, of sweat, of a handshake. In 1992, people still believed HIV could be transmitted that way, and fear needs no scientific evidence to exist. Before the game, Isaiah Thomas, his closest friend, the man Magic regarded as a blood brother, walked over and hugged him in front of thousands of spectators. The hug looked sincere, warm, moving. But behind that hug was a truth Magic did not yet know. Magic stepped onto the floor, 25 points, 9 assists, MVP. He played as if HIV did not exist, as if the November press conference had been only a bad dream, as if a death sentence were something that could be canceled by a crossover and a smile. The moment that remains forever is the three-pointer at the end of the game, the ball leaving his hand, arcing perfectly, dropping cleanly through the net, and Magic turning back to the camera with a smile. But this smile was not the carefree Showtime smile of those nights at the Forum. This was the smile of a man who had looked death straight in the face, turned on his heel, and said over his shoulder, "Not yet." David Stern later said that the decision to let Magic play that night didn't just change the minds of the players, it changed the world. Magic proved with his own body, with sweat and collisions and celebratory high fives, that you could hug someone with HIV, touch someone with HIV, compete with someone with HIV, and no one would catch it. In one night, he destroyed more prejudice than any public health campaign had ever managed. That summer, the final chapter of the resurrection was written in gold, literally. The Dream Team Barcelona Olympics, the greatest basketball team in the history of sport. Magic, Jordan, Bird, Barkley, Ewing, Pippen. Magic called it the greatest moment of my life. Not because of the gold medal, but because for the first and also the last time, he and Larry Bird wore the same uniform on the same side. The two enemies of an entire decade, California sunshine and Boston snow, finally stood on the same front line. Both knew this was the last time they would step onto a competitive court as players, and the moment carried the sweetness of nostalgia mixed with the salt of farewell. After the Olympics, Magic did not stop. He founded the Magic Johnson Foundation, dedicating the rest of his life to fighting the thing that had nearly killed him. He lobbied Congress for research funding. He met patients society had abandoned. He walked into communities no politician cared to enter and said, "I carry this virus too, and I am still standing here." He did not merely survive. He chose to turn his survival into a voice for millions who had no smile for the world to see, no fame for the media to care about. After the All-Star Game and the Dream Team, the world wrote the neat story it wanted to believe. Magic Johnson's had beaten HIV. Newspapers printed victory headlines. Television told the miracle story. Magic smiled on every magazine cover, as if everything were fine. But what does victory mean when the enemy never leaves? Medicine must be taken every day, not one dose late. Tests every quarter, not one missed. T-cells must be counted, monitored, prayed over every time the numbers appear on the lab report. Beating HIV is not an event that happens once and ends. It is a process that repeats without a final day. Without a single moment, he is allowed to forget that what flows through his veins is the thing the entire world once regarded as death. The world wanted to believe he had won. Magic wanted to believe he had won. But HIV didn't care. Yet while the world celebrated Magic Johnson's resurrection, another story was unfolding behind closed doors. The story of Irvin, as Magic wrote in his autobiography, My Life. After every game, there were 40 to 50 women waiting in the hotel lobby. They pretended to care about an autograph, but you'd sign and write your room number next to it. Or you'd whisper, call me or meet me in an hour. He didn't hide it. He didn't justify it. He didn't blame anyone. Women lined up to sleep with athletes. I had my share of opportunities, and I took them. That was the NBA culture of the 1980s. That was Los Angeles. That was Showtime, not just on the court but off it, where the lives of rich, young, famous basketball stars operated by their own rules that the outside world never saw. But to call it only culture is a lie. It was a choice, a personal choice. From any angle, the one who paid the heaviest price for that lifestyle was not Magic, but Cookie. 14 years, from their first date to their wedding day. 14 years in which Cookie Kelly endured things that would have driven any self-respecting woman away long before. Magic called off the wedding twice, not months in advance so she could still regroup. But at the last minute, when Cookie had already planned everything completely, had already told all her friends, colleagues, and relatives, when her entire world knew she was about to get married. Both times, Magic simply said coldly, I can't do it, no explanation, no deep enough apology. Cookie recalled that she nearly had a nervous breakdown. Then in 1981, during a breakup, Magic had a son, Andre, with a woman named Melissa Mitchell. The child was born and Magic never told Cookie. It wasn't the out-of-wedlock child that was shocking. It was the complete concealment, as if the child didn't exist, as if Cookie didn't deserve to know the truth. And after all of that, after 2 canceled weddings, after the girls in bathrobes in the dorm, after the secret child, after a lifestyle the whole city knew about except her, Cookie still stayed. Why? That question has no simple answer. Because of love is corny and unfair to what she had to endure. Because of dependence, insults a woman stronger than most men. Cookie answered in her own way, and perhaps that is the most honest answer. It's not how he got the disease that matters. What matters is that he could die. And that overrides everything. She did not forgive out of weakness. She forgave because she saw what the outside world did not see. Irvin behind Magic, the man behind the legend, and she decided that man was worth fighting for. But even a marriage saved from HIV was not immune to the ordinary wounds of life. In 2001, after 10 years together, everything nearly collapsed again, and this time it was not because of the virus or other women. Cookie recounted in her memoir that Magic was too immersed in being Magic Johnson. His ego had swollen so large there was no room left for anyone else in the room, including his wife. The final straw came the night Magic received his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. At the party after the ceremony, Cookie wanted to dance with her husband. Magic refused. Their first public argument erupted. Cookie left the party alone. We were growing in 2 different directions, she said. They separated for 2 weeks, completely in secret. Not a single tabloid sniffed it out. 2 weeks of silence, 2 weeks standing on the edge. Then they came back not because of a miracle, but because both chose to come back. Cookie turned to the book, The Power of the Praying Wife, and learned to pray for her husband instead of praying against him. They met with a pastor. They talked. And Magic, the man who had twice run from the most sacred promise, rented the entire Magic Mountain amusement park to celebrate their 10th anniversary, stood in front of friends and family, and declared a lifelong commitment to the woman he had hurt the most in the world. Magic Johnson on the basketball court was a genius no one dared question. Magic Johnson in marriage was an ordinary man trying, and trying is perhaps the bravest word in this entire story. He was not perfect. He twice ran from the most sacred vow. He lived promiscuously and brought a deadly virus home to his pregnant wife. But he was also the man who knelt and wept with his wife on the floor, the man who sat alone calling every ghost from his past to take responsibility, the man who rented an entire amusement park to tell the world he would never leave again, and the man who every year writes on Instagram, "Cookie, you have made me a better man, a better husband, a better father." Irvin Johnson was both the betrayer and the penitent, both the source of every wound and the one who spent the rest of his life bandaging them. And Cookie, the woman the world usually only mentions as Magic's wife, is the only reason both of those sides could exist in the same person without tearing him apart. When HIV arrived at age 32, most people, even those who loved Magic most, thought his life was essentially over. They were wrong. Magic Johnson's second life was not only larger than the first, it was 37 times larger, measured in money. Total earnings from the NBA over 13 seasons, $40 million. Net worth in 2025, according to Forbes, $1.5 billion. More than 97% of Magic Johnson's fortune was created after he left the basketball court. The boy who once put his feet up on the executive's chair on the 7th floor now truly sits in that chair, and no one can kick him out anymore. Magic Johnson Enterprises began with an idea Wall Street considered crazy, investing in black and minority communities that every major corporation had abandoned. He opened movie theaters in the inner city when no one believed poor people would buy tickets. He opened Starbucks in neighborhoods where Starbucks had never dared set foot. He opened gyms in places that major fitness chains considered insufficient market. And he was right, every time. His philosophy was simple, almost to the point of crudeness. Go into the community, own the businesses, create jobs for our people. But the real empire was built with things far less glamorous than Starbucks and movie theaters. Equitrust Life Insurance, a life insurance company based in Iowa, as far from the Hollywood lights as possible, was his largest source of wealth. Under Magic's hand, Equitrust's total assets grew from $16 billion to $26 billion in 8 years. Not sexy, not viral, but that is how real billionaires are made. Then came sports, the territory Magic understood better than any boardroom. Co-owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, 3 World Series championships in 2020, 2024, 2025. Co-owner of the Sparks, WBA champions in 2016. Co-owner of LAF MLS champions in 2022. Co-owner of the Washington Commanders. The NFL dream he called the greatest business achievement of my life. From the boy mopping floors in Lansing to the owner of a sports empire spanning the 4 largest leagues in America. The perfect story. Too perfect, because every empire has cracks, and Magic was no exception. In 1979, Nike offered the rookie stock instead of cash. Magic chose Converse. He later joked, "That probably cost me $1 billion, the biggest mistake of his business career," but the way he talked about it, shrugging, laughing, moving on, showed something important about Magic's character. He did not let failure haunt him. But there was one failure he could not shrug off and walk past. In 2017, the Lakers invited him back as president of basketball operations, the return every Lakers fan dreamed of, the legend coming back to save the team to which he had devoted his youth. Reality was harsher than the dream. According to those who worked under him, Magic used threats and bullying. He frosted the office glass so no one could see inside. He called employees by generic nicknames, Big Guy, Buddy, instead of their real names, as if they were not important enough for him to remember. Genius on the basketball court turned out not to mean a good leader in the boardroom. In April 2019, Magic suddenly resigned right before the final game of the season, without notifying owner Jeannie Buss, without a single internal announcement. The real reason, according to close sources, he had accidentally read an internal email between Buss and general manager Rob Pelinka, criticizing his poor performance. Magic Johnson, the man beloved everywhere he set foot his entire life, faced real rejection for the first time from within the organization he loved most in the world, and he could not stand it. He walked away instead of facing it, exactly the way he had twice run from the wedding with Cookie. But the deepest wound did not come from the boardroom or contracts. It came from Isaiah Thomas. Magic and Isaiah had once been such close friends that they kissed each other on the cheek before every game, a rare image in the hyper-masculine world of sports, a symbol of friendship that transcended rivalry. But when Magic announced his HIV status, Isaiah did not stand by him. Instead, according to the book When the Game Was Ours, Isaiah wandered through NBA locker rooms, whispering the questions only a traitor would ask. Was Magic bisexual? Did a bisexual lifestyle lead to the virus? While Larry Bird, the decade-long rival Magic, had hated on the court with the most primal intensity, called immediately to offer support, Isaiah, the brother, chose to stab him in the back at the exact moment Magic was bleeding the most. That betrayal was not just personal drama. It showed that HIV did not only attack Magic's body, it attacked every relationship around him. The virus did not only live in the blood. It lived in the way others looked at him, in the questions they whispered behind his back, in the fear and judgment that even the closest friendship could not withstand. Magic Johnson built a $1.5 billion empire from the ashes of a career cut short, but money cannot buy back lost trust. Isaiah's betrayal, the failure with the Lakers, the $1 billion that vanished because he chose Converse over Nike, each is a reminder that he is a human being, not the immortal legend the media created. But the man brave enough to stand before hundreds of millions of people and say, "I am HIV positive," was not brave enough to look his own son in the eyes and say, "Dad accepts you." Irvin Johnson. 3 was born on June 4, 1992. EJ's existence was tied to the darkest moment, yet at the same time the gentlest miracle. Both Cookie and the baby remained uninfected with HIV. As EJ grew up, the unusual signs came early. He later admitted, "When you grow up in team sports, you think, is he going to play sports?" Then I saw him liking dolls and playing dress-up. "What are you doing?" Magic Johnson. The man who could see through 5 defenders on a basketball court, but could not see who the son standing right in front of him was. Cookie saw it first. On a vacation in Hawaii, she sat behind EJ and his friend. Girls in bikinis walked by, no reaction. Guys walked by, whoa. Hey, Cookie knew immediately. Okay, we need to talk. EJ came out to the family in 2010, when he was 17, and Magic's reaction was exactly the worst fear of any 17-year-old. EJ recalled. He really had to swallow that. He kept saying things that weren't very nice. He's not the type who handles it well when he's backed into a corner. Magic set a rule. EJ was not allowed to bring scarves into the house. The scarf, his favorite fashion accessory, the thing he wrapped around his neck as part of his identity, something small, harmless, just fabric, was banned from crossing the threshold of his own home. The real person of the child was forbidden to exist in the very house where he grew up. Cookie struggled in her own way. The Christian faith she had clung to her whole life now put her in a bind between the Bible and maternal love. "That was a very, very hard thing for me," she told Oprah. "In the end, I told myself, this child is innocent. He's been like this since he was little. He can't be wrong. I prayed, and the answer I received was love." In 2013, EJ entered New York University. TMZ published a photo of him holding hands with his boyfriend on the street. He was outed publicly before he could choose the timing himself. The world knew before he was ready for the world to know. And then Magic came to visit his son in the dorm. EJ recounted that moment with a voice that still trembled. "I had only been there 2 months. He came to pick me up and I greeted him casually like, 'Yeah, hi.' Then he hugged me. Tight. So tight it squeezed all the air out of me. That's when I knew there was only love here. No 80,000 spectators. No cameras. Just a dorm hallway in Manhattan, a father and a son, and that breath-stealing hug in which every banned scarf, every harsh word, every meaningless rule dissolved." Magic later said about EJ, "EJ changed me. I had to accept who he is. Actually, he helped me get there because he was so proud. This kid is proud of himself to an astonishing degree." From the father who banned scarves, he became an open LGBTQ+ advocate in the 2 most conservative communities, the sports community and the African American community. He said on television, "My job is to protect my child. There will be people who are unkind, but that's not his fault. It's not about you trying to decide what your child has to become, but loving them no matter who they are." There is a generational loop running through this story. Irvin Sr. loved his son but was too busy making a living to truly be present. Magic was present materially but absent in acceptance, present in the living room but absent where his child needed him most. And finally, in middle age, he learned the lesson his father never had the chance to teach. Loving your child is not loving the version you dream of, but loving the version they actually are, even when that version wears a silk scarf and holds hands with a boyfriend on a Manhattan street. The man who once said, "I will beat HIV," and fought with steel will for 3 decades here learned that there are battles not won by will, but by surrender. Accepting his son was not a victory the way magic was used to winning. It was a surrender to the truth that love demands more courage than any championship game, and the world is a million times more complex than any basketball court he ever stepped onto. Magic Johnson at 67 wakes up at 4 a.m. every day, no days off, works out for 2 hours, takes his medicine, goes to the office, works all day, comes home, sleeps, then 4 a.m. The next morning, the routine repeats. For 35 years, he talks about it with a calmness so ordinary. You almost forget it's not the schedule of a disciplined businessman. It's the schedule of a man keeping himself alive. I've done my part, the medicines has done its part, and my wife always reminds me to make sure I finish my part. Every time I go for a checkup and the T-cell count is off the charts, that's when I know I'm still okay. Wake up, train, medicine, checkup, T-cells, repeat. This is not victory. This is a war of attrition, and Magic is the soldier who never gets discharged. But if you only look from the outside, you would never guess that war exists. Because on the outside, Magic Johnson at 67 is more radiant than at any other point in his life. A billionaire with a $1.5 billion fortune. Owns stakes in the Dodgers, Commanders, Sparks, LAFC, and Washington Spirit, 5 professional sports teams across 5 leagues. In 2025, President Joe Biden awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in America, something money cannot buy and fame cannot guarantee. He remains a leading voice on HIV, community investment, and LGBTQ+ rights. He still smiles on every stage he steps onto. And his family, the thing he nearly destroyed multiple times, is now an image he himself wouldn't have dared dream of 30 years ago. More than 34 years of marriage to Cookie. Every Friday night, the two of them still go to the movies and buy popcorn, a tradition that began in their Michigan State college days, preserved through HIV, through near divorce, through every storm, as if Friday night at the movies is the one thing in the world no one's is allowed to touch. Every summer, the whole family takes a yacht trip in the Mediterranean. Magic Cookie, Andre with his wife Lisa and 2 little grandchildren Gigi and Avery, EJ with his unmatchable vibrant fashion style, and Elisa, the adopted daughter now a social activist. The family photo on the boat deck looks like a magazine cover. But every person in that photo carries their own scars the camera cannot capture. Granddaughter Gigi wears a Lakers number 32 jersey for Halloween, and Magic calls that his proudest moment. Number 32, the number he wore when the whole world called him Magic, the number he wore when doctors said he was about to die, now worn by a 5-year-old as a costume, innocent, carefree, knowing nothing about blood and T-cells and 4 a.m. Perhaps that is the real victory. When your legacy is light enough for a child to wear it while trick-or-treating. But beneath that radiant surface, the undercurrent never stops. Magic never gets to retire from HIV, medicine every day, checkups every quarter. Worry every time the body feels unusually tired, a mild fever, a sleepless night, a morning waking up with a heavier body than usual, and the question immediately returns. Is the virus waking up? 35 years and counting. The world declares he has won, but HIV is still there, in every drop of blood, every morning at 4 a.m., and the people he loves leave one by one. Jerry Buss, his second father, died in 2013. Kobe Bryant, the kid he watched grow up in the Lakers jersey, died in 2020 in a helicopter crash that froze the whole world. The Showtime generation is aging. The faces that once ran with him on the forum floor now appear more in obituaries than in sports news. Magic has lived long enough to witness it all, and sometimes living long is also a form of loss that no one talks about. Magic Johnson at 67 does not fade. He does not quietly disappear into the sunset like many other legends. He is more radiant than ever, but that radiance requires daily fuel, and that fuel is steel discipline, medicine, and a battle that no camera films, no stands witness, no applause rises for. Magic Johnson is not a perfect hero. He twice ran from the wedding, lived so promiscuously that he brought a deadly virus home to his pregnant wife, had a child out of wedlock that he completely hid. Banned his own son from bringing a scarf through the front door. He is also not a tragic victim. He turned $40 million into $1.5 billion, turned a death sentence into 35 years of healthy living, turned stigma into human rights advocacy, turned an awkward hug with his gay son into a public voice for an entire community. He is both the betrayer and the penitent, the source of the wounds and the one who spent a lifetime bandaging them. The man who smiles dazzlingly on stage and the man who wakes in the dark at 4 a.m. to keep his heart beating. And precisely because he is both, precisely because he is neither saint nor sinner, his story is a human story. The real tragedy of Magic Johnson is not that he contracted HIV at 32. The tragedy is that he defeats it every day for 35 years, and the world thinks the war ended long ago. It has never ended. It only moved from the basketball court into the clinic at 4 a.m. And there are no spectators, no standing ovation, no skyhook for the whole world to remember forever. Only the needle, the pills, the T-cell numbers on the lab report, and Cookie, the woman who chose to stay when he said, "You can leave." Still sitting beside him, still reminding him to take his medicine, still keeping this man alive after the whole world has forgotten that he is still fighting. That is the real magic, not the man smiling on the court before 20,000 fans, but the man who wakes before dawn in silence and chooses to live one more day. At the beginning of this story, we said, the world sees the smile, the world does not see the battle at 4 a.m. Now you have seen both. When you look back on Magic Johnson's journey, what comes to you first? The Showtime smile, the HIV diagnosis, the billion-dollar empire, or the battle at 4 a.m.? Share in the comments below. The smile is still there, the battle is too. If this story touched you, please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories, the ones the world only tells half of, and we'll tell you the other half. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next video.